TopMedTalk.
Nick Majerison here. This podcast contains information which younger listeners may find disturbing. However, we think it's important that awareness is raised around the world about this issue. Today's TopMedTalk is called the Grenfell Inquiry. It's presented by one of the founders of TopMedTalk, Martin Howe of Howe & Co., who represents families that were in Grenfell Tower on the night of the fire in 2017. It was presented at Dingle 2019, the 21st Current Controversies in Anaesthesia and Peri-Operative Medicine, and SIAA Autumn Congress. Also, this talk was preceded by one from the consultant anaesthetist Marcella Viscay-Chippy on duty at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in the early hours of June the 14th. And it is to her and the medics at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital that Martin pays tribute.
So Martin is a senior partner of Howe & Co. Solicitors, which is a London-based law firm specialising in campaign work and high-profile litigation. To name but a few of his achievements, he's received a prestigious Liberty and Justice Human Rights Award for a successful litigation campaign on behalf of tens of thousands of Gurkha soldiers in a residency settlement claim against the British government. He has successfully represented Jeremy Corbyn in the legal challenge attempting to keep him off the ballot sheet in the election for leader of the Labour Party in 2016. And more recently, as we all saw in the media, because it's quite topical at the moment, he most recently successfully represented the Labour Party in the Supreme Court case finding Prime Minister Johnson to have acted unlawfully in suspension of Parliament. Relevant to this talk, he represents, along with his team of lawyers, 69 core participants in the Grenfell Tower public inquiry. And he's here to talk to us today about the Grenfell Tower inquiry.
So good morning. First of all, can I start by thanking Marcella, not only for your speech today, which was really instructive and thoroughly interesting, but also for your work that night. Many of the people that I represent went through your hospital. One of the families we're going to talk about a bit later. And the care and attention, urgency, dedication, hard work, skill was so evident. So thank you for that in really difficult times. So I represent 69 of the bereaved survivors and residents from Grenfell Tower. Grenfell Tower is in my patch. I grew up in West London and going to school. I used to walk past Grenfell Tower as it was being built. And it was a very balmy night, actually, the evening of the 13th of June leading into the 14th. It was a warm, balmy night. I couldn't sleep well. I remember waking up about 1:30 in the morning, turning the television on, see the news, and lo and behold, this tower that I knew was ablaze. At that stage, they were reporting 6 deaths. By the time I next awoke, so around 8 o'clock and watched news, 72 people had died, and many others were injured. It was a massive incident. It is the biggest loss of life and fire in London in residential accommodation since the Second World War. I'm honoured to actually represent the people who live there. Immediately after the fire, some of the gutter press attacked those who lived in the tower, describing them as scroungers and scroungers and cheats. Disgusting stuff. It was a block. There was a social housing block initially. 12 of those flats had been sold off by people who wanted to buy their own flats. 2 had been bought by a housing authority. And the rest of it was social housing. But the people in it had the whole mix that you'd expect of a village in the sky. There were people who, one of my clients actually led the team in Imperial of 200 researchers at the time. Others were key characters in Ofcom. Others were teachers. Others were street sweepers. Many families. It was a community. It's a community where the kids used to play football on the lobbies and areas, and school was right beside it. They went to church around there, and on that night, their lives were turned upside down and destroyed. They lost loved ones. Their house was burnt out and moved into different parts of London. The people in Grenfell Tower were not helpless. The people in Grenfell Tower needed to be helped by the richest local authority in London, London being one of the richest cities in the world. So that's the situation that is now. You got Grenfell Tower covered. Decision still hasn't been made what's going to be done with this. But it's back in, there's a committee of ex-residents and members of bereaved families dealing with that. So there you are. There's Grenfell Tower as it was. It was a concrete block, and it was completed and built in 1974. There were 23 stories of residential flats, 6 flats per floor. The views from Grenfell Tower were magnificent. And those people who lived there shared photographs with myself and others of the most fantastic views over London. It may well have been a social housing block, but it was one of the finest blocks around. But there you are, you can see a concrete block. Concrete doesn't burn. If that had been left as it was, I wouldn't be here and Marcella wouldn't have been talking. But what happened was that the local authority decided that it would refurbish Grenfell Tower. The planning application referred to the gentrification of the area and the aesthetic that was needed, so-called needed, to improve the look of Grenfell Tower. And there you have it, clad, nice shiny rain screen cladding. It was part of a £10 million project. And what happened was that they refurbed the whole inside and the exterior, and it's the exterior envelope that is absolutely critical and key to what happened at Grenfell. I'm going to show you some slides and some film that's going to remind you, you probably have seen it before to an extent, but remind you what happened. What happened in the early hours of the 14th of June, 2017. Flat 16 on the 4th floor of Grenfell Tower is where the fire broke out. It was occupied by a Mr. Kabedi, a man from Ethiopia. He had lived there for 25 years. His friends lived in the tower. He awoke just before 1 on the 14th of June because an alarm went off in his flat. Not every flat, there was no communal alarm system, but he did have a fire alarm in his flat. And he went out and looked into his kitchen, and what had happened? He had a Whirlpool hot point fridge freezer, and a fire, an electrical fire, had broken out at the back of that fridge freezer. Fridge freezer had a plastic back, and the plastic back had caught light. In America, you can't have plastic backs on these type of fridge freezers, only metal backings. That's one of the things that really does need to change. And it's not as if Hotpoint Whirlpool didn't know about this. There are about 300 of these type of fires each year in the United Kingdom of these types of fridge freezers. But Mr. Kabedi he was lampooned again by the gutter press, actually, in the early days after the fire. They said that he just simply saved himself. They took photographs from his Facebook of him on holiday and made out that he'd left with his case and was enjoying himself on some Spanish beach. The man was destroyed. The police told him that he needed to go into witness protection because of the attacks that were being made on his character. But when this man woke up with the alarm, first thing he did was close the kitchen door, locked it off, He then woke up the two lodgers that he had living with him. He'd come in from work that night. He's a hard-working man, but to make ends meet, he also had two lodgers with him. He got the two women up, got them out. He then went around his floor, knocked every neighbour up, made sure that they were out of the tower. And he went out and he phoned straight away. And the first phone call, the first 999 call of that day, as you can see, was at 54:29 a.m. I'm going to play it to you. You listen to his voice and listen to the reaction.
Brigade.
Yeah, hello, hi. In the fire, flat 16 Grenfell Tower.
Sorry, a fire where?
Flat 16 Grenfell Tower. In the fridge.
Right, hang on.
Flat 16 Grenfell Tower.
Flat 16, and what's the postcode?
W11-1TG.
W11-1T for Tango.
Yeah, but can you quick, please?
Yeah, would you just, I have to get the address. Okay, Glenn.
Flat 16 Grenfell Tower, W11-1TG.
The fire brigade are on their way. Are you outside?
Yeah, I'm outside.
Yeah, well, the fire...
So this man did everything he could and should have done. And he also took a film as soon as he got outside of what was going on. That is the outbreak of the fire on the 4th floor at flat 16. I'm going to play on a little bit of a video of it in a minute. I'd like you to look at the top half, because new windows had been put into Grenfell Tower during the refurbishment, and they had a ventilation unit in the top half. That ventilation unit melted and broke out in very many of the flats and then allowed the fire in. But at this point in time, none of the fire was on the exterior. The envelope was intact. Watch what happens.
Dropping down.
They finished. This fella.
Is it your house, bro?
Yeah.
You can see that the fire was escaping. As soon as it escaped, it hits the cladding outside and the insulation. And within 12 minutes, the fire had hit the top of the 23-storey block of flats. When it hit the top, it hit a crown, a decorative crown that had been designed and put on top. All that did was help to spread the fire horizontally. This is a film of what the fire was like after about 10 minutes. Again, when you're watching it, you'll see pieces of material flying off the building. That is the cladding, the rain screen cladding that had been put on the exterior as part of the refurbishment. There's also bits of insulation that come off. Just watch this.
Oh my days. Oh my days, man. Oh my days. Oh my days, bro. Oh my days. Oh my days. Hello? Oh my days, man. Nah, man. Call Tonky, bruv. See if Tonky's okay, man. Call Tonky, man. Call Tonky, man. Ali, call Tonky.
Move that collapse gonna through this way.
Bruv, I know. We need to cut out the way, bruv.
Right, Mumbo, I'm not near it. You lot.
Shocking. You'll see, though, that it's going up one part of the elevation, because it happened in flat 16, and the line of fire attack in the first place went up along flat 6 on each floor. And you can see that to the left there and around the side, there was no fire at that stage. But as I say, when it hit the crown at the top and went around, the whole of the building was consumed by fire. And Marcel, you were talking about 8 a.m. when you handed over. It was at 8 a.m. that the last person came out alive from Grenfell Tower. Quite amazingly, actually. It's a Chinese man. It's a rather haunting picture. One of the families that I represent is the Cowchair family. I represent Sawson Cowchair. She lived in a flat on the 22nd floor with her mother. 2 flats down along the corridor lived her sister, her brother-in-law, and her 3 nieces, aged 4, 8, and 11. Sawson went out that evening, went up to Earl's Court, an area near where Grenfell Tower is, to meet some friends for a drink. And while she was there, she got this call that Grenfell Tower was on fire. So she came back and was outside the tower on the phone to her family, because her mother had now moved along and joined her other daughter, her 3 grandchildren, and her son-in-law in that flat. And there you can see them, they're waving, hoping to attract helicopters, as they thought at the time, that would come and rescue. They couldn't get out. The 6 of them all died. You're talking about psychological help for your people. The lawyer, I head up a team of 9 lawyers in our firm that are dealing with the Grenfell Tower disaster. The lawyer who listened to the telephone calls from that flat is receiving help and counselling. And the impact is wide on our team helping, let alone, obviously, the families and the survivors. So there you have it. There's Grenfell Tower in May 2017, after its refurb. And there's the various states at different times. Yeah, the concrete tower there on the left, if left alone, wouldn't have caused a problem at all. The clad tower on the right, that's the reason that it burnt down. Now, I want to talk about 3 families there. These are 3 representative families as opposed to going through everyone that was involved. But their stories are typical of what people went through in that night. It's the Talabi family. That's Sean Talabi, the man of 30 years of age at the time, from Nigeria, with his wife, Rosemary. And they lived in flat 113 on the 14th floor with their 4-year-old daughter, Kazia. Kazia suffers from autism, is a special cares child, in a very supportive and loving family. They woke up 1:30 on the morning of the 14th June to be met by firefighters rattling on their door. They opened it, and then there was just pure black, thick smoke outside. Firefighters in breathing apparatus, telling them to stay there. Stay in your flat, we'll come and get you. I went back in. About half an hour later, another knock at the door. Firefighters again. This time, bringing other residents from the same floor, because their flats had caught light, and putting them into flat 113. So Dennis Murphy, an Irishman, came in, man in his 60s. By that stage, he was in a bad way. Sean's wife sat him down on a couch, wiped the dust and soot and blackness from his eyes and his ears and his mouth. He wasn't really able to move that much at that stage. They're also joined by Zainab and her son, both from Sierra Leone. Jeremiah, the son, was only 4 years old at the time. And also by 2 brothers from Syria, Mohammed and Omar. So there was our family, the 3, plus another 4 people had come in. Sean went to the door see what we could do to try and get out, and realised it was virtually impossible. So what he did was he then got all the bed sheets, it's like you see in a prison film, all the bed sheets, towels, pieces of clothing, and tied it together to make a rope. And he intended climbing down the outside of the building with his daughter strapped to his back. He was then going to drop, he said, and land on his front, save his daughter, and get out. He in fact did climb out the window. He threw the rope out, climbed out the window, but then when he was holding it, he wasn't convinced that it was going to actually hold their weight. So he tried to get back in, he couldn't. And the two Syrian brothers came and carried him back in. There, in fact, if you look carefully, see on the right-hand photograph's probably the best. You can see the rope hanging down there. That's what Sean made. And at about 2:45, the firefighters came again. And they knocked on the door and said, just get out, get out. So he had tied his daughter to his back with ropes. And he grabbed his wife's hand and they dashed. And they got out. He managed to get down the stairs. When he did, they realized that the firefighters hadn't brought them all. One of the brothers was down with him. One wasn't. Dennis wasn't, nor was the young child and his mother. And the four of them died in the flat that night. It's one of the contentious matters in Grenfell because the firefighters claimed that they checked the flats, make sure it was empty. Clearly it wasn't. And the firefighters were fantastic on that night. Heroes, very many of them. But obviously mistakes do happen. Mistakes can happen. And that is one of the, that's probably the most contentious issue concerning the firefighting action that night, flat 113 on the 14th floor. This is the Neda family, beautiful family. Family from Afghanistan. They came here, or came to London as refugees 20 years ago. Father on the left there, Saber. He was an army captain over in Afghanistan and fought against the Taliban. Taliban had threatened him and his life, his family's lives, so they had fled. And they came to the UK. They had one son. Fahad's in the middle there on his graduation day. Graduated as a mechanical engineer. And his mother, Flora, on the right. She was on the 23rd floor, the highest floor in Grenfell. But she was disabled. Her mobility was very poor. They came back from a night out because it was Ramadan, actually, on the 13th of June, 14th June. So many Muslim families were out breaking bread with their family and friends. They came back 2 minutes before the fire broke out, and they're seen getting into the lift and going up. When they got up to the top, the ventilation system there was noisy. It often broke down. There's a ventilation system that was meant to bring fresh air in and drag smoke out. Another contentious issue in Grenfell. It didn't work. But they realized something was wrong as soon as they got to the top. They went into their flat, had a word about it. They could hear noise and commotion. And then they decided to leave. But when they went to go out, they were met by a wave of people coming up the stairs, running away from the smoke and the flames. 4 women came into their flat. And then the family were there. They were phoning, making 999 calls, being told that the firefighters were coming. The truth of it was they couldn't get past the 15th floor. And these people were stuck on the 23rd. Only 2 people survived from the 23rd floor. And that is Farhad and his mother. Father, as the family went to leave, the father stopped to assist the other women who were in the flat with him. The last sight that his son saw of him was he was putting wet cloths around the face of the other women. But the fire then became incredibly overwhelming on the 23rd floor. They were back to the windows. And in fact, Saber, the father, decided his best chance out of there was to jump. And he died in the playground below. The women also died in the flat. The only reason that the mother and son got out was because the son carried his mom on his back down the hallway. There's Saber the father. He was in his army clothing, and there he is having a nice cup of coffee. But before he died, he left a message on a relative's mobile phone. I'm going to play that to you, and you'll see the words underneath it. Three people died from jumping. Saber from one of them, obviously. Third and last family I'm going to talk to you about is the Gomez family. Again, another beautiful family, Portuguese family. Marcia there on the left, his wife Andrea, and his two daughters, Luana and Megan. They were on the 21st floor of Grenfell Tower. And they were woke at 1:30 in the morning by one of their neighbours knocking on the door saying, "The place on fire." So the neighbour, Helen Gembriskull, and her daughter came into their flat. And they started phoning 999 to get through to find out what's going on. Overall, they made 4 phone calls. First 3, they were told to remain and stay where they are. And finally, at 3:30, they were told to leave. But the smoke, acrid, poisonous smoke, was thick in the lobbies and thick on the staircase. You couldn't see a thing. So let me just show you something. At 2:30, Marcio decided that he would try and get his family and the 2 neighbours out. So he took a video going up to the front door to see what's going on. And you'll see a black screen on this. It's not a mistake. It's what was outside when you open the door. So this is at 2:30.
Why are you crying? Why are you crying? You are crying.
When they did go, they went in a crocodile formation. Marcio put Helen at the front, an adult. They put the 3 children in the middle, and then they put his wife. His wife at the time was 7 months pregnant. She had a baby boy who was to be born, Logan. They were delighted. They had 2 girls, and they were delighted that a son was on the way. They prepared for it. One of the bedrooms in the flat had been converted to a baby's room. And what made them leave at 3:30 was that the fire had broken into the flat and had caught light on the Moses basket. When they saw that, I thought, it is time to go. They didn't think they'd make it. Marcia had been running the shower for as long as the water kept going in Grenfell. He wrapped his family and their 2 friends in wet towels and then he led them down the stairs. This is Marcio at the Grenfell Tower Inquiry. I've listened to the telephone calls that were made with the emergency services that night, the 4999 calls. I'm going to play a little bit of the last one. There was a command room officer called Heidi Fox. Wonderful woman, actually. She encouraged them as they were going down, but well, I'm not going to describe it. You'll hear it. You can imagine facing out into that black smoke, and you just listen to the coughing and the spluttering. What happened was that very soon the family did get separated. The two girls, there were two of the girls, there were three also, but two of the girls coming down didn't hold on to the rails as asked to, because they had two pet dogs. They had the pet dogs under their arms. As Marcio found later, he found that he was down the stairs and he could hear the girls back up behind him. And he went back up.
You need to get your family outside.
Yes, we're doing it now.
Okay, good. Keep phone with you and I'm going to stay on the line, okay?
Okay.
Okay, all hold hands, okay, and get as much wet clothes on you as possible.
All hold hands, girls. Hold hands, girls. Everybody hold hands.
Right, put some wet clothes or wet, and put it against your mouth. Put some over your mouth. The wet.
Yeah, we've got it. Everybody's got it?
Right, you all together?
Yeah, we have to go. We have to go.
They're on the corridor now. They're trying to get downstairs. All holding hands. Yeah, I'm still on the phone to him. Yeah, told them. Yeah, they know. Right, hello? Yeah, the firemen know. I know you don't talk to me, just listen to me. The firemen know that you're on that floor now, okay? Take a few deep breaths, because you've got to be strong, okay?
Go,
you've got to be strong.
Come on.
Don't give up.
You can't, come on.
Don't give up.
Come on, where's the fire brigade? Jesus.
They should be there.
Come on, girls.
To breathe. We've got them.
Come on.
They're being so brave, so brave.
Girls, come on, it's better down here. It's better down here, come on.
There's no air.
Come on, keep holding the rail, come on, push. Push through.
He's got 3 kids and his wife, are they?
3 kids and a heavily pregnant wife. And I've lost
his wife's pregnant. He's lost her.
Girls, come on. Keep walking down. Keep walking down, girls. Girls, keep walking down. Keep going. Keep going.
Keep going. What?
It's better down here.
Is there more air down there?
There's nobody here still. Come on.
You get an idea what it was like in the stairway. That phone call went on for 33 minutes. It's an interesting medical case, because how did he actually survive in the fumes, poisonous fumes of that night at that time? See, the intensity of the poisonous gases changes over a period of time. But the 2 girls passed out on the stairs, but he went back up. He got firefighters, he went back up, and they brought them down unconscious. And they went to King's Hospital and Praed Street. His wife, Andrea, got out, but was then taken to King's and put into an induced coma. And the child, Logan Gomez, was delivered by cesarean that night. Stillborn. Died of cyanide poisoning. Marcio was there for the delivery of his stillborn child. And there's Logan. What a loss. What a terrible loss. The youngest death at Grenfell Tower. So let's ask why. Why in London In 2017, a disaster of that type can take place. Should have been a kitchen fire. It was a kitchen fire. The policy adopted for high-rise buildings then, and still now, although it's very much under question, is a stay-put policy because of compartmentalisation. The idea is that if a fire breaks out in a flat, in a tower block, it will be contained within that flat. That's how it had been before, so they thought. That's fine if you don't wrap the building in highly combustible, flammable material. If I had a pan of petrol here and I threw a match onto it, that would catch light slower than the materials on the outside of Grenfell Tower. Also had a single staircase. Now, I've walked down the staircase in the shell of the building that's left. Tiny, narrow staircase. No alternative. There was no plan B for getting out of Grenfell Tower. When the local authority wrapped that building in flammable material, it was just a disaster waiting to happen. And it did. The refurbishment, the £10 million refurbishment that I mentioned at the very beginning of this, took place between 2012 and 2016. There had been modifications before that, but the major one was during this period. And critically, they put in new UPVC windows. There were gaps left in the windows. The windows had combustible, highly combustible material in them and supporting them, and the filler was highly combustible. If you remember back to the shot of the video of flat 16, you saw the flames coming out through the top right-hand corner there. It came out and it hit the insulation that stood behind the rain screen cladding, the shiny, new, smart-looking rain screen cladding. Not only was that happening, but the constructors, the people who put the stuff up on the outside, were meant to put fire blocks in. Many fire blocks either weren't there, or they put upside down, put in the wrong place. So you had a tunnel-like situation behind the cladding. And as soon as the fire got into the rain screen, it's a ACM, it's aluminium composite material in the middle of it with the highly flammable stuff. As soon as it hit that, there was no stopping this fire. Barbara Lane is the fire expert at the Grenfell Tower inquiry, the one that's been main expert, woman from Dublin, instructed by the inquiry to investigate and look into the causes. And this is what she said in her evidence. Primary responsibility for flame spread is Rain-O-Bond 55 PE, polythene core. That is the rain screen cladding. The fire was in the cladding by 1:08 a.m. If you remember, the first phone call was at 0:54, so very, very quickly out and into the cladding. Nothing could then stop it spreading around the building. It's her evidence that if those materials had been known about, the building should not have been occupied. It was not possible to mitigate that type of fire. That's why I say that building should not have been handed over in that condition. Maybe to sum it all up, once the fire entered the rain screen system outside flat 16 on the east elevation, the Rain-O-Bond rain screen cladding panel, coupled with ventilation cavity, backed by the Celotex insulation or Kingspan insulation, incorporating defective vertical and horizontal side-rise fire-stopping material and missing cavity barriers around the window, failed to control the spread of fire and smoke. There were a whole host of reasons why this fire was unstoppable. But it's all involved and all about the outside envelope of the building. So the day after the fire, Prime Minister Theresa May announced a public inquiry. 72 people dead, over 70 injured. And Sir Martin Morbick has been appointed as a retired Court of Appeal judge, and he's the chair. He didn't start well, actually. He got down to the Grenfell Tower site, met very many distressed, angry, bereaved, injured residents and families from the area. And then told them that his inquiry would be over by the following Easter 2018, and that they wouldn't, they should be careful about what they hope for, that they might not get all that they hope for. That wasn't the way to start it. I'm glad to say that my firm and the other law firms that are involved in it made sure that he was made aware and is aware of the importance of this inquiry and of the need to do it completely and thoroughly. Now, there was no report by Easter of 2018. In fact, the proper hearings, didn't start until May 2018. So Sir Morbick has split it into two phases. Phase 1, effectively being what happened on the night of the 14th of June. That has involved many of the bereaved families and residents coming and giving evidence, including Marcio, as you saw. That picture was from him at the inquiry giving his evidence. It's also involved many of the 400 plus firefighters who attended Grenfell Tower on that night. And I think only 2 members actually from Kensington and Chelsea have given evidence so far. We've also had expert evidence. So the people who appear in a public inquiry, and the purpose of a public inquiry is to find out what's happened, to get at the truth. It's not to find any criminal responsibility, and it's not to find any damages or compensatory liability. It's just to get at the truth. And the purpose of it is to make recommendations so that we don't see this damn type of thing again. So the people who take part are called core participants. And you'll see there that there are 590 individual core participants. That includes members of families that obviously weren't there on the night, but are related to those who died. Now, I currently represent 13 people who died, and the families of 13 people. There are 20 commercial core participants. So the architects, the designers, the providers of the insulation, the providers of the rain screen cladding, the overall project managers, those type of people, they're all there, teamed up to their teeth in lawyers. There's 2 trade unions in there representing the fire brigades, and there's 7 public body core participants. Central government and local government do have answers, do have questions to answer here, particularly about regulation and the way this regulation has been deregulated. So as I said, the hearings started in December and September of 2017. Commemoration hearings took place in May 2018 and went on into June. We insisted that the inquiry opened with details of those who died. It was a battle to have that done. The inquiry team wanted half a day to talk about the 72 who died. It ended up going on for 3 weeks, quite rightly, and each family was given the opportunity to make sure that the voice of their loved ones who died is loud and clear in this inquiry. So phase 1 of the inquiry finished on the 12th of December last year, after 123 days of sittings with over 140 witnesses. Documentation in this case is enormous. Currently, there are 665,000 documents. That's not pages, that's documents, and that's increasing. Now, Martin Morbig did not publish his report by Easter of 2018, but he will publish the Phase 1 report on the 30th of October. So I get to see it 3 days before it with families and residents who were there, clients, and 3 days later it'll be published. I hope it's hard-hitting. It should be. Then we are now into Phase 2 of the inquiry, which is not what happened, but the more important question, really. Why did it happen? And I'm not going to go through all the things that have been looked at, but there's 13 identified issues that are to be dealt with over the next year and a half or so. And you can see it includes the construction, it includes governance and management. There was a tenants management organisation in there. The local authority had farmed off their responsibility, or attempted to farm off their responsibility to a tenant management organisation. But the two of them, I will ensure, are absolutely on the hook. The aftermath is the last thing we're looking at, because you might recall the response hospitals was fantastic. But the response on the ground leaves a lot to be desired. If it wasn't for the community rallying around and for volunteers coming in and helping, it would have been even worse. Families out of there, no place to live, not a stitch of clothing, obviously all their goods gone. And the emergency plan and package that ought to have kicked in just was missing. So that's going to be looked at. What next? Well, there will be recommendations made by this inquiry, and they will have worldwide impact. We are not talking about just what happens in London. It's what happens over here. It's what happened in Australia, happened in Hong Kong. There's been fires around the world, and everyone is looking to this inquiry to give them the guidance that's needed. The police are in the background on this as well. They have been carrying out an extensive investigation. It's the largest police investigation that has taken place. There have been 6 interviews under caution, but no arrests yet. And the police have now announced that they will have to wait until the end of the inquiry before they will make their decisions as to what will happen. Clearly, because there is evidence to be given and evidence to be gathered. But there is calls from the residents and the bereaved families that those responsible are properly held to account. I've seen the papers where costs were cut. For example, the rain screen cladding was changed from a zinc front, which was fire resistant, to an aluminium front, which is not, to save £293,000 in a £10 million project. So we need to know who made that decision and why, and who advised them. There's never been a corporate manslaughter case in the UK yet. But if there is going to be one, this is the case where people will be looking for it. Of course, then the families should be compensated for what happened to them. They are the victims here. So we've looked at damages claims in the UK, and obviously we look immediately to the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea with their huge coffers that they sat on and didn't use to sort of help. We look to the Tenants Management Organisation. We look to the government and local government authorities. But we have launched proceedings in Philadelphia because the fridge freezer that caused the initial spark of this fire is manufactured by an American company. And as I said, you cannot have those type of fridge freezers in the US. You have to be metal back in the US, not plastic. The insulation, the Celotex insulation, cannot be used in the States on buildings over 10 meters because of its high combustibility. Yet they ship that over to Europe and elsewhere. And the rain screen cladding, similarly, cannot be put up on buildings in the US over a 10-metre height. But again, shipped out and marketed and sold here. So we've issued proceedings against them in their own backyard to hold them to account. And yes, damages can be larger in America. And yes, there can be punitive damages to stop these corporations, these greedy corporations, from spreading death and injury. And the proceedings are underway. There's a fight about jurisdiction. Should it be in America or should it be in London? There was a judgment earlier this week on disclosure, which is favourable for us, for the victims. And I hope that that does stay there, and I hope that it does become an iconic reminder to the corporate world that safety and life does matter. So I'll end now. There's a bit of a downer of a speech, but there is some good news. I spoke to you about Sean Talabi coming out the window on his rope and his family. Well, there you go. He had a baby son born on the anniversary day, actually, of the fire, exactly 1 year after it. And I'm very pleased to say that Noah has been to the hearings, and when his parents were giving evidence, very fine evidence, he made his lungs known to the judge and the rest. And I've also spoken to you about Marcia Gomez, who lost their son, 7 months in the womb, son Logan. Well, there you go. He had a daughter born on the 7th of September last year. So if there's goodness to come out of it, it's that life does go on. Thank you very much.
Nick Majerison here. You've just listened to the Grenfell Inquiry. Don't forget to check out TopMedTalk.com for more details on this podcast. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening.